Among the old World Cups that quickly come to mind, the 1950 World Cup is certainly one of them. And whenever that World Cup is mentioned, the story of the Maracanazo also comes up. Brazil's infamous, or perhaps famous defeat, is the central story associated with that tournament. However, the immense challenge of organizing a World Cup after World War II is often overshadowed by the history of the Maracanazo. The war had ended, but was it really over? The world had just entered the era of the Cold War. Yet, people had already begun searching for ways to rebuild and move forward. Football was one of those ways. The 1942 and 1946 World Cups were not held because of World War II. The 1942 World Cup was supposed to be hosted either by Germany or Brazil. But by 1950, it was difficult to find a country willing to host the tournament. Naturally, after a world war, nations were focused on rebuilding themselves. Eventually, Brazil was persuaded, with considerable effort, to host the World Cup. That is why the tournament was postponed from 1949 to 1950. Before the 1950 World Cup, Germany was still divided. Germany had no opportunity to host the World Cup. One side was under the control of the Red Army, while the other was under Allied administration. Saarland, formed from the French-controlled zone, became a FIFA member before the World Cup. However, they were not able to participate in the World Cup either. Communism was rapidly spreading across Eastern Europe at the time. Hungary and Czechoslovakia, finalists in previous World Cups, also chose not to participate. In South America, Argentina was once again absent. This time, their dispute was with the Brazilian Football Confederation. Citing that reason, they boycotted the World Cup for the second consecutive time. Despite being one of the finalists of the very first World Cup, they did not participate. England had stayed away from the World Cup until then. At that time, the famous British Home Championship was held in Britain. The national teams of Britain competed in that tournament. The top two teams from the 1949 Home Championship would qualify for the World Cup. England finished first and secured a place in the World Cup. The English were finally taking part in the World Cup of a sport they considered their own creation. Scotland finished second that year. Under FIFA rules, they were also eligible to play in the World Cup. However, the Scottish Football Association was unhappy after losing to England. They decided not to participate in the World Cup as runners-up. As a result, Scotland declined to take part despite qualifying. Turkey also withdrew from participation. India also did not take part in that World Cup. To this day, India has never played in the FIFA World Cup finals. Why exactly did India not participate in the World Cup? Many people claim that India boycotted the World Cup because they were not allowed to play barefoot. However, historical evidence does not strongly support this claim. It is true that India played football barefoot in the Olympic Games, both before and after that World Cup. But FIFA repeatedly warned them that playing football barefoot was not advisable. The truth is that India did not place much importance on the World Cup at that time. For them, the Olympic Games were still the most prestigious international tournament. Italy were the defending World Cup champions. However, that achievement was almost a decade old. By then, the entire world had changed dramatically. But Italian football had changed for an even more tragic reason. It was because of a heartbreaking plane crash. On May 4, 1949, Torino FC were returning to Italy from Portugal after playing a friendly match. Most of the club's players were also members of the Italian national team. Shortly before landing in Turin, the aircraft crashed into a basilica on a hill. Everyone on board the Italian airliner lost their lives. A total of 30 people, including players, coaching staff, and journalists, were killed. That tragic disaster nearly destroyed Italian football. Within a year, a new team had to be built using young players. Italy went to the World Cup with that rebuilt and inexperienced squad. This time, however, They did not travel by airplane. Air travel had become a painful and frightening memory for Italians. 20 years earlier, teams had traveled to Uruguay by ship for the first World Cup. It was as if time had turned back once again. Instead of flying, Italy traveled to Brazil by ship. To attract more spectators, the organizers changed the World Cup format. Groups 1 and 2 each contained 4 teams. Hosts Brazil, Switzerland, Yugoslavia, and Mexico were placed in the same group. Group 3 had 3 teams, while Group 4 had only 2 teams. Uruguay's group contained only Bolivia. The winners of the 4 groups advanced to the final stage. They were Uruguay, Brazil, Sweden, and Spain. The teams would now play against each other in a round-robin format. The team with the most points would be crowned world champion. Uruguay stumbled in their first match against Spain. Meanwhile, Brazil crushed Sweden 7-1 and Spain 6-1. Brazil had become the overwhelming favorite to win the title. The final match was between Brazil and Uruguay. Uruguay had somehow kept their championship hopes alive. In effect, this match had become the tournament final. To understand why the Maracanazo is so heartbreaking for Brazilians, some context is necessary. The year before the World Cup, Brazil had won the Copa America. They had scored a record number of goals in that tournament. Before the final match of the World Cup, Brazil had scored 19 goals. Their opponents, Uruguay, mainly relied on counter-attacking football. Although not particularly attractive, it was highly effective. No team seemed capable of stopping Brazil's attacking football. Brazilian newspapers had already assumed that Brazil would become champions. Some even printed headlines declaring, "Champion Brazil." The public had also come to believe it. After all, there was plenty of evidence to support that belief. Even the mayor of Rio de Janeiro was extremely confident. He had already prepared 22 gold medals. He expected to place them around the necks of Brazil's world champions. The stage was set, and the heroes were ready. But the Maracanazo suddenly felt like a graveyard. The official attendance figure was one thing. However, it is believed that nearly 200,000 people were present in the stadium that day. The match began exactly as expected. Brazil kept attacking and creating chance after chance. The memory of the Maracanazo still brings tears to Brazil. In a later interview, Gigia proudly said, "Only 3 people have ever managed to silence the Maracanazo. One was the Pope, another was Frank Sinatra, and the third was me." With that goal, he gave Brazil one of the greatest tragedies in football history. However, goalkeeper Barbosa received most of the blame for the defeat. In Brazil, he was treated almost like a villain. He once said that the maximum prison sentence in Brazil was 30 years. Yet he had been paying for that mistake for more than 50 years. He spent much of the rest of his life as an outcast. The 1950 defeat left a deep scar on Brazil's national psyche. After the World Cup, Brazil decided to abandon their traditional white jersey. They considered that jersey unlucky. That led to the creation of Brazil's famous yellow and green jersey. Although the 1950 World Cup ended, its story did not. The Maracanazo remains one of the most unbelievable events in football history, and the story of the 1954 World Cup contains another great upset waiting to be told. That story is known as the Miracle of Bern. So friends, that's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this fascinating story from history and learned something new. If you love discovering untold stories, world wars, World Cups, empires, mysteries, and documentary-style content, be sure to subscribe to Archive Kingdom and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. I'd also love to hear your thoughts, so let me know in the comments. Your feedback and support inspire us to create more exciting content. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it with your friends. This is Rahul Shapno, signing off for now. I'll see you in the next video with another remarkable chapter from history. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and keep exploring the stories that shaped our world. Thank you for watching, and thanks for being part of Archive Kingdom.